Hey, how you doing? Welcome to another episode of McCall Studios TV. Here we're going to talk to you about how you can download the UK's entire list of registered businesses that live with Companies House, and then how you can work through and sort that data to build yourself your own direct mail mailing list, or even use it as a research activity to check out different websites in the genre of businesses that you want to collect and build it into a mailing list of yourself. So if you've no mailing list whatsoever, you don't know where to start, this is a timely activity, but it's free of charge and it just needs a little bit of elbow grease. Okay, so we're going to dive right on over to my left monitor. So as you can see, I'm already navigated through to Companies House. So you literally have to go to download.companieshouse.gov.uk, and or if you type in free company data product Companies House, something like that, you will find yourself on this page. Now, a few things to bear in mind: you can download as one single file the entire mailing list, the entire database of every single business registered in the UK with the UK government. As you can see there, it's 421 meg, and just to give you an idea, my home computer setup here, I'm running a computer that's custom built like a server, so very powerful, on a 200 meg internet connection line, and this takes forever and it screws up my entire sort of operation. So I would suggest you work with these 7 smaller segmented files. They're still incredibly meaty, 60-70 gig ago, and they will still use all the resources on your computer. If you're doing this on a small little laptop somewhere, you are going to struggle. So try and get yourself a really decent computer to work through this activity. So all you need to do is download these 7 zip files, and they will end up in your downloads folder like anything else. So once you've downloaded those 7 files, the next thing you're going to need to do is get your hands on the standard industrial classification codes, or SIC codes. Now, there isn't a file to download here. If I quickly just show you, when you scroll down the page, you can see that these are all the different types of classifications of business genres that a business in the UK can register with the government with or under. Now, they do change this list quite regularly, but at the moment, on the time of filming this in the end of July 2022, these are the valid SIC codes that you can actually use. Now, the easiest way to get your hands on this, because you're going to need to sort this data, is literally scroll to the top, get your mouse and sort of drag over, and as you've dragged down a few, hold down the shift button and then the page down, and it's the quickest way to literally get down this entire page. As you can see, the cursor on the right, or the scroll bar on the right hand side, moving down. Once you've got to the end of the list, you can just literally do a good old fashioned control and then paste it into an Excel spreadsheet. So here you go. So I've got that list. All I'm literally going to do is paste it in here into an Excel spreadsheet. I'm just going to sort of widen these columns so that I can make it nice, neat and tidy for me. And there we go. We've got every SIC code now that's valid in July 2022. You are going to need to sit here with a good cup of coffee and work your way down this list. There's just scrolling down, there's approximately, I was going to say about 600, 700, 800. How many have we got? About 750 SIC codes. Now, your business is probably going to work with a couple of dozen of those at max. So you're going to need to literally go down this entire list and clean this list up, because you're going to need this in your data sorting later on. So for example, if you're not into businesses that grow rice, you could just delete it, and away you go, tobacco and all sorts. Don't forget, this is to cover every kind of business under the sun that operates in the UK that needs to register with the UK government. So you sort your list out, and when you've done all of that, you're going to end up with probably about 20 lines of codes, and they're correlating business genres. If you don't know what some of these are, because they're a bit ambiguous with their titles, simply just take the SIC code and the title, Google it online, somewhere out there. I promise you someone will have answered that question for you. Okay, so for an example of an activity, at the moment I'm running a business exhibition and conference in September, so I'm trying to build a mailing list now of companies that might be useful to advertise or have a stand, or for my business to get in contact with, and to supply my sales force with some businesses that they could go and maybe research on the internet. So I've gone through this entire list, and I've got a whole list of what I would class as business to business type suppliers that work for my particular marketing purpose purpose and need. And this is the list that I've got left with. Now I've got quite a few on here, there's 61. As you can see from this, there is no titles or headers or anything. It's just literally the pure data that I've left with. I would say that's probably on the generous side. I would try and narrow it down a little bit more, but because this is a particular event that has opened to all kinds of business, this list is going to be particularly long. But for example, if I was going to do a research into maybe, let's say, businesses that have opened up and launched in the last 6 months, maybe accountancy firms in the last 6 months, I could use these codes, and there's probably going to be about 4 or 5 that are going to be relevant. So it depends on what your particular purpose is. Don't think a one size fits all. Once you've done this, you're never going to need to do it again. Every time you do a different type of marketing activity, think deeply on the audience you're trying to attract, what type of business genres they'll be listed in, and then redo this activity to get your sort of primary list of genres that you are wanting to target. So that is your SIC codes. Now, once you've done that, make sure you've saved it somewhere on your computer that you can use and access in the future, because you're going to use this quite a lot in the coming few hours as you work through this Registrar list of companies. Okay, so as you can see on my computer screen here, I have these 7 zip files downloaded, and I've just literally extracted all of the data. If you go into any one of those, you can see that this is how the file itself looks. It's a CSV file. The file name gives you the date that you downloaded it or when it was last updated. So in this case, this particular list was last updated on the 1st of July 2022 and made available to the public. I'm in the 3rd week of July, so it's about 20 days old. So I know I'm working with the latest data. And so basically you need to make sure you've got the copy of this saved. Now, what I will suggest to you is that you maybe create yourself a filtered lists folder, a bit like this. There you can see where my SIC codes document is. And also what I've done is I've just made myself a couple of notes on how I'm particularly filtering my data, because if I want to repeat this activity, which I will do for my next exhibition, I want to remember how I did it and got to the results that I got. So that's just a personal note to me, but if you get yourself a filtered lists, you can see there, and the reason it's saying 3 of 7 is because I've bumbled around with the first 2 downloads, and the 3rd one is the first result that I've genuinely wanted to get. So I need to go back and work this process that I'm teaching you today for part 1 and part 2. Part 3 I've done, and I've still got 4, 5, 6 and 7 to do, which is why I thought I would jump on this computer, because I intend to give this job to a virtual assistant, and I thought if I'm going to have to teach them, I might as well teach you guys, and everybody wins from this effort. So how do we work this data? So first of all, I will warn you, it takes a while for these files to open, so I'm just going to literally open this right now, and it's going to open up in an Excel document. This process, if it freezes your computer, this is all based on how much memory and power and resources that your computer has. Now, as you can see, I'm still talking. This takes about a minute to open on my computer, and like I said, I've got quite a powerful machine. There is a high possibility you're going to get to this stage, and if you're using a small, like what I call like a teenager laptop, something you buy your kids for Christmas, you are really going to majorly struggle. It's probably going to time out and give you a like sort of a non-responsive program error, at which point just don't even go any further. See if you can get your hands on a more powerful computer to do it, because you are going to struggle with every activity that you're going to need to do for the next part of the video. And as you can see, I'm still waiting, so I'll be back in just a second when this is actually powered up onto my screen. Okay, so this is how the actual data opens up. It's all very condensed. The width of all the columns, all the data is merged together, so we're going to walk through this very pragmatically in a second. Just to reiterate, for the moment I'm working on part 4 of 7 parts of this database. Okay, now the company name, what I will do is, if you click in that top left corner and then move your cursor between the column headers and double click, it will actually make every column as wide as the longest part of the data, so you can see your data clearly. Okay, so this is how I methodically go through this process. So first of all, I move everything around so I can see it. So there's my company name, which I'm going to need. That's the company business register number. Now I actually find that these 2 fields or columns of data I don't need, so I'm going to delete it. And I do suggest you delete what you don't want, so maybe make 2 copies of it, so you've got the original and then your altered version, because there is so much data on this spreadsheet that it still makes my computer hang. So sometimes I have to be careful with what I'm doing. Now I actually want the address because I want to build a mailing list manually of all these businesses that I'm going to pick out and depict for this particular activity. So I'm just moving along here. I don't need to know it's in the UK because obviously I'm a UK business, so I decide I want to work with UK businesses. I definitely need the postcode, which we are going to sort, but I will tell you now, if you try and sort it at this point in time, it will crash the spreadsheet. So we're going to come back to this particular column of data. We're also going to want to work with this. Now this is where you start to filter. So if you select that top line and then look, I'm on the home tab, and you move over to the top right corner there, you can see that I've got the filter option, and when I click on that, every column header now appears with these little sort of field sorters. Okay, so that's the one on the postcode, but we are going to filter right now. I only want to work with private limited companies, so I'm going to deselect everything, scroll down, where's my private limited company, there we go, and click on OK. That doesn't crash it because obviously I've done this 2 or 3 times over the last 2 or 3 days just so I know what works. I also only work with businesses that are active. I don't want to work with them if they're about to be striked off or in liquidation, or if they're dormant. So you can see there's various different types of status there, so we can go through and instantly select just active businesses. Okay, and I'm going to just make that slightly smaller. What I'm also going to do is I'm just going to reduce the size. Now I know that's going to make it a little bit harder for you guys to see the text, but there's so much data here that I find that it's easier for me to work with it if I reduce the zoom down to 70%. So there's my column of active companies. Again, we know they're in the UK. I don't need to worry about the date. Now if I was doing a marketing activity that was maybe targeting brand new startup businesses, then this particular column here called the incorporation date, that's the actual date the business was registered with Companies House. That would be a really important one. As you can see, there's a business there from 1993, 2015, 2020, etc., 1989. So some of these have been around for a long time. So I'm not using that information right now with the particular marketing activity I'm doing. I don't care how old the business is. So I'm just going to get rid of these next few columns of data. I'm literally going to delete them because I have no need for them whatsoever. And the less data that's in the spreadsheet, the smaller the memory, the easier it gets to work with this file. The next, that's accounts next due, so that's the date they need to submit them back into the Companies House and tell the government what they're doing. I don't need that for this particular business or this marketing activity, but what I do need is I only really want to work with businesses that are kind of current and up to date. So although I know that they're active, some of these, if you look down here, that's 2020. Some of them, I don't suppose there's any 2019s, but I really only want to work with businesses that are kind of up to date because they know what they're doing. So again, I'm going to filter this particular field here. So I'm just waiting for that to load. So I'm going to deselect everything, and I'm only going to work with businesses that are kind of up to date in the last 18 months. So it's July. That means any business that's updated its accounts and details with Companies House this year, so far in the first 6 months of this year, or at all in last year in its entirety. So that will remove a whole load of clutter. The next one here as well. Now this is about how big that company is. So for example, my exhibition is for businesses in the UK, which are micro companies like mine, where I've got 1 employee, to small, which is generally from about 5 to 10 employees, or medium-sized businesses that are generally sort of 10 to 50. Those numbers might not be quite right. It does depend whether you're looking at the FSB classifications or if you're looking at the government classifications, but generally speaking, the activity that I want to focus on right now needs to deal with micro, small and medium-sized businesses. So I'm going to get rid of everything else, and as you can see, there are loads and loads of micro businesses in the UK. In fact, it's the biggest genre of classification that there is in the UK. Okay, so we can narrow that column there down. Let's just squeeze these along a little bit. Okay. We don't need, for this particular activities, like you guys, you need to go through and delete things that you don't need. So I don't need any of this data here. So I'm just going to remove it. Give it a second to update. I don't need this one here. This is the SIC codes. Now I do want this. So obviously this is what the whole thing is about, so I can identify the genres of companies that I want to work with. Now I'm just going to scroll the bar along. I know you can't quite see that, but there's actually, you can choose 4 different categories. Now I will tell you, it's up to you how you work this. Personally speaking, I think I just go with the first one. So I actually delete the rest of the SIC codes now. And if I just quickly scroll along before I get too crazy here, I think the most of the data for the marketing activity I'm now doing, I don't need. So I can get rid of these columns. I am going to keep this one where it says URI. That is essentially a it's like a link back to the actual page on the government website as to where you can find out the information on that particular business. Now, because I'm going to give this as a research activity to a virtual assistant, they might need to use this, or maybe go and check out the company to get some more data on them. So I'm going to leave that. That might be useful, but I know now from having played around with these spreadsheets now for the last couple of days, I don't need any of this other data for the particular marketing activity that I'm going to do. So I'm literally selecting all these columns. I have right clicked, it just took a while because there's so much data, and I'm just going to delete everything that I don't need now. So I've kind of got myself like a kind of first draft raw copy of all the fields and all the data that I want. Now, this is where I'm going to say you're going to start needing to make copies, because even though I've deleted a whole bunch of fields, if I start doing anything with this now, it is still going to make a crash on my computer, because although we can't see it, those fields and rows of data are hidden. If you look down here, you can see that the row numbers are all hiding different rows. That data still exists in the spreadsheet, and therefore it's still a lot of information that the computer has to process when I start fiddling around any further than I have done. So what I'm going to do is I am literally just going to copy the column headers all the way across my columns. Okay, right click, and I'm going to copy this. Okay, now I am going to just open up a brand new spreadsheet, and I'm not just going to do a paste, because that will also paste the hidden rows, which I don't want. That's the data that we're trying to get rid of. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click, and I'm going to choose paste values. If you hover your mouse over it, will come up with the word values. So it's the one that says 1, 2, 3. And there's all my data. Now, if you look, the numbers of rows are all sequential again, which means that all those hidden rows of data have disappeared. And it took about 10 seconds for that pasting operation to finish, because even though we saw it really quickly on screen, it's still working right down the thousands and thousands of records that there is. So again, we go through a second tidy up. So now that we've done this, we've got the data, we can keep the company name. We know that we want these address fields. Again, I'm going to make it down to 70% so that I can see more of the screen of what's going on. So I'm just going to keep some of this and just tidy it up. And then the next details we're going to do. So I know it's private limited and active, and the dates, so we don't need that. And as you can see, the pasting there, it's just formatted the value. So if you wanted to show the date, whatever your activity is, you'd right click on this column, format cells, then just basically select date, and away we go. So there, the date field is still there, but I don't need any of this detail now. So I'm going to get rid of all 4 of those. So again, that's reducing the file size down as much as I can. What I'm then going to do is I'm actually going to swap these 2 fields around, if I can do this without causing a problem. There we go. And I'm just going to delete that empty column, because for the next few activities that we're going to do, we need this SIC codes to be in the spreadsheet positioned where there's lots of spare columns of data next to it, because we're going to start filtering and doing lookups and all sorts. So before I go any further, I'm just going to save this. 4 of 7 filter 1. So this is the first time I filtered it. That save activity has now stopped. So the next 2 areas that we need to filter is we need to filter out on these postcodes, and we need to filter the SIC code. Now, from playing around with this myself, the easiest thing to do is actually filter everything by SIC code first of all, which is a bit complicated process. And then with whatever is left, so we know then we've just got a list of all these businesses in this section 4 of 7 spreadsheets that are the correct genre, we then can search and filter down geographically, because there's no one going to drive more than an hour's drive to an expo in the UK for the type of business and the event that I'm running. So really, I'm going to focus on just Milton Keynes postcodes in a minute, and Northamptonshire postcodes. So all of these others that say Croydon or Manchester or Leeds or whatever, we don't want any of that data. But if I select and filter now, I'm going to screw up this side and it gets a little bit complicated. So let's start by handling these SIC codes. Now, before we can start doing a SIC code column lookup, if you can see there in this title at the top here, this one field contains a 5-digit number, a dash, and then the name of the title of that particular genre of business, which is fine, but it's no use to us in a VLookup strategy. So the first thing we need to do is get the first 5 digits of all data in these fields. So as you can see, I've positioned my cursor on the field that's adjacent to the first record, and I am literally going to type up here equals the word left, open bracket. Okay, once the bracket is opened, I'm going to click on the field that we're looking at. So this is the field that we want to study the information of. Click back up here in my formula bar, and it's giving you a hint just underneath it of to how this formula is written, the syntax. Put a comma, because now we need to tell it how many characters to return, which is 5 digits. And then I'm going to close the bracket. So that's my formula finished, and then I'm going to hit return. And as you can see now, I have selected out just the first 5 digits, no spaces, no anything else. Now, this is where things get a little funky, because if you hover your mouse cursor over that little cross, the little box in the corner, you can see it goes into a normal cross. Double clicking that will mean it will populate all the way down. However, there is so much data on this spreadsheet. I have experienced this causing Excel to crash. So I'm going to give it a go. And if it works, great. But just to give you a heads up, I don't know if we can see how many records. At the moment, we're on line 187,357. So that's 187,357 businesses, and that's just one of 7 of these spreadsheets, and that's after we've deleted a whole bunch of stuff that we don't want. So there's just so much data in here we need to filter. Now, if we go back to the top, there's my SIC code. So I'm going to double click it, and hopefully it's not going to crash my computer, but the idea is that we now need to copy this formula all the way down to the very end. Oh, and it's done it. So sometimes I've had success, sometimes it has literally crashed my computer. Let's just scroll down. So you can see now that every record there, we've segmented out or sectioned out the 5-digit code. Okay, that's great. Now, the next thing that we have to do is actually deal with this data. If you look at this first field, that's the actual data we want as humans. But if you look, the actual value behind the scenes is the formula, which means it's going to screw up everything that we're going to try and do. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy that column of data, and we're going to paste it value only, like we did before. And then once we've done that, we can delete this. So it looks the same, but if you look now, the actual behind the scenes data is actually the number. Now, the other thing that we've now noticed is if you look, when I click on it, the little green triangle thing disappears. Okay, so when we're looking up the values, at the moment, that's because the fields, even though you could do format field, it's saying it's general and we can turn it to a number of 0 decimal places, it still screws up the VLookup formula. So I'm going to do that, but it's still, if you look carefully, these little triangle warnings are still appearing, and you can get it. I mean, if it's only 3 or 4 records, you can double click on the field, take your mouse off, and you can see there that it gets rid of that little marker. But if you with nearly 200,000 records, you'll be there till Christmas doing it. So we're going to select the entire column. We're going to go to the data tab. We're going to move along to where it says text to columns, and we are going to work through this. Now we want it to be delimited. Click on next. You're just going to leave it as tab. You should go through all of the default settings. You don't need to fiddle around with any of it, but just click finished. And as you can see now, all of those have now right aligned, and all those little triangles have gone. So now we're working with like the proper raw data in a number format, and it's not going to screw up our VLookup. So this is when that other spreadsheet comes into play. So there's my VLookup codes. We're just going to delete things that we don't want, because this is a lot of memory going on my computer, what with me filming as well. So I know this is going to crash things. So I'm just going to get rid of literally everything open that I don't need. So we are now running just the programs to record this video, the Excel spreadsheet with my SIC codes, and we are running the actual filtered mailing list that we've got here. So this is now how we're going to do the VLookup. So now we've got our 5-digit codes. We're going to place our cursor in the field next to our 5-digit code. Click on the formula button and obviously search for it, but if it doesn't come up in the suggestions, you want the VLookup, click on OK. I like to work with these little pop-up boxes sometimes on things like this. So basically these 4 fields are asking me to fill in data. So it's like a set of instructions so the computer knows what to do. So the first one is what's the value that we're going to look up, which happens to be, now you can click on these little arrows and it allows you to just kind of select it, and as you can see there's like a little green swirly marker line going around the box that we want. So click back on our little button there and you can come back to this pop-up. So we're saying look up value J2. Now what we want to do is we want to compare it to all of the values in our other spreadsheet. So I'm going to click on this little button again, and this time I'm just going to Alt-Tab with my fingers on the keyboard to bring up my SIC codes. And as you can see, we're on column A, record number 1. I'm just going to select the entire column all the way down, okay? And it's populated the formula there. And I'm just literally going to click on this. This little box comes with me on the screen at the moment. I go back and then it's going to say how much of that data. Now I only selected the 1 column, so we only need to put 1 here. But if this was an activity where you needed the first 3 columns, maybe that was more comprehensive, you would actually write the column numbers there. And then we're going to put in here the word false. So if a value doesn't match, it's going to tell us that there's a problem, and I'm going to click on OK. Now, don't worry about this NA, it just happens to be that that particular first record it's checked on doesn't exist. But I'm now going to double click on that again and populate this all the way down my spreadsheet, like I did before, and give it a few seconds because there's a lot it's got to think about. Okay, we'll give it a second, and then what we can do is we can just widen that column out. And as you can see now, the data does vary between NA and the number, okay? So basically when it's returned the number, it's telling us that a record in that SIC code of companies that we actually want to find and work with exists. So it's basically a business in the genre that I'm targeting. And if it's got NA, it means they couldn't find the SIC code. So all we need to do now is actually filter this spreadsheet again, SIC valid codes, okay? So there's my little title. To use the filter on that home tab, this filter, you need to have a title on your column. So I'm just going to place the cursor up here and away we go. We've got our column filters. Now when I click on that, obviously there's every code number, there was like 60 odd that we wanted, but if you slide down to the bottom, the very last one is the NA. If I deselect that, now what happens is I've got a list of results, and again you can see the columns on the left hand side have hidden loads and loads and loads of records. Now my filtered list is 100% the businesses around the UK in section 4 of 7 spreadsheets, so that's roughly letters beginning with K through to about L, that I want to work with. But now we just need to sort them geographically. But again, there is so much data here, we're going to make it a little bit easier for ourselves by copying it all the way through like we did before. Right click, copy, and then I'm going to open another new spreadsheet, and then I'm going to right click and paste the values. Okay, once that has finished doing so, I can widen my columns. Yeah, we can get rid of a lot of these, so let me just make this down to about 70%. Okay, so we can get rid of all of these, can be a little bit smaller. There we go. There's my SIC codes, and if we move over here now, we've got those codes that we want. We don't need this data anymore, so I can actually get rid of it. So delete those columns of information there. What I need to do now is just work on their geographical location. Okay, so this website, GB as in Great Britain, Maps, is worth the £20. Now, I've paid £20 to be able to use this freely now for the next 12 months without any hindrance. If you haven't paid for it, you can kind of still get the data, but it's got like license numbers all over most of it, etc., and it gets a bit messy. What I wanted to use it for is so that my event is going to be in Milton Keynes. So I'm going to start by putting in the postcode of my office. Okay, Okay, and then I want to sort it by the time it takes to drive, and sort of like the next 90 minutes, so I can see nicely. And it shows you down here that it's going to show me the results in increments, 3 different increments: 30 minutes out, 60 minutes out, and 90 minutes out, and that's the color codes. But I could have selected 10, and then it would have showed me a ring of all the different zones of how far out from that postcode it takes to drive. But for my activity, this is nice. Green and yellow is my primary, and maybe the 90 minutes as a curiosity factor. Once I'm happy with all of this, I click on the create button, and what it's going to do is going to make the map give me a big color coded plan of what is covered within a 30-minute drive, a 60-minute drive, and a 90-minute drive. Using this, once it has finished doing its thing, as you can see there, I was then able to save this as a PDF, because this is quite small to zoom in on, but you can then zoom in on the PDF quite heavily. But you can literally just zoom in on this quite nicely. My mouse is a bit cumbersome, or you can zoom, and then you can see your postcodes. So if you're doing a geographical exercise a bit like me, then this is how you could go about it. So this is what I've done. So you can see there that Northampton, Milton Keynes is right in the centre. That's my 30-minute driving zone. All the yellow is good. I mean, I could also target SG and HP and Luton and all the rest of it, but I've got enough data within those 2 main postcode zones to not to worry about everything else on this particular activity. So I'm going to look at postcodes beginning with MK and postcodes beginning with NN. Okay, so how do I filter that? So first of all, go back to our data, apply the filter, okay, and then from here, again, you're going to see it's going to come up with every postcode. There's so many. I think if you click on that, it says something like there's 10,000. There you go. It'll only show you the first 10,000 unique postcodes. So too much data there. So the easiest way to deal with that is, once it's finished doing its thing, unselect everything. And then I want to type in MK and a star. The star is like a wild card, basically telling Excel that I want every postcode returned that starts with the first 2 letters being MK for Milton Keynes, and then I don't really care what the rest of the postcode says. And as you can see, it's going to take a wee while to do that, and that is how we start to filter down our data. Okay, so we're on the last leg now, but as you saw, I was really struggling to get that filter process to look up. So we are going to go through the VLookup process again on the postcodes, so that we can actually get this to work for us. So all I'm going to do is literally grab a copy of the postcodes. Okay, just check the value. That is the true value in the actual data cell. That's great. Okay, we are now going to grab those first 2 letters using that left formula. So equals, left, open bracket, click on the cell that we're going to look at directly to the left, and then we are going to put in a comma, 2 digits that we want to return, and then close the bracket and hit return. And there is my BH from there. And then, as before, I'm just going to move my cursor over until it's a 4-headed like cross, double click, and that's going to populate all the way down. So just to remind you, we are working with about 52,000 records still at this point in time. Let's have a look. We're on line 52,237. So that's probably why the computer was, the other filter process was still struggling. Okay, so now we've got our postcodes. If we click on any of them, though, we can still see that the formula is in the actual background, which is no good to us. So we're now going to copy this again, copy and paste the values. And then we can delete this because we don't need it. So now we've got that. We don't need those postcodes there even more. So now we've just got our 2-letter postcodes and everything is funky. So we need to just make sure, it's good practice. I don't know, because it's text, not numbers, but I'm just going to go through this process before, just purely because it's to do with the data formats, that how we're looking things up. I know it caused a huge problem when I was learning this process for myself beforehand. We just need our 2 postcodes. So obviously if I wanted 4 or 5 different postcodes, I could add a few more there in. So we're going back to sheet 1. So we are now going to run our VLookup. So we are going to go into our VLookup. We are going to look up the value in the cell next to the left of it. We're going to look from our table array. So I'm going to click on that to go to our table array. I'm in sheet 2, by the way. I know you can't quite see it because of my little person in the bottom left corner. I'm going to select those 2 fields. Now, when I was tinkering around for a solution a minute ago, I am going to put the dollar in before the A1 So before the letter A and before the letter 1 in cell A1, and a $ before the letter A and 2 for cell A2, so that it locks in that we want to focus on just those 2 fields, because I was having a few errors with my formula on the VLookup a minute ago. Go back, we're looking at the first column of data, and we're just going to put the word false in there if it's no results that we want. There we go. Obviously that BH is not one of the codes that we're looking up, so I'm just going to double click and send that all the way down, and instantly we can see here that there is a result. That one says NN for Northampton. If we go along this line looking at, there's a Northampton based business, so we know that the process works. Scrolling down, there's an MK, another NN behind my head there on the images, so you can see that the results have worked, so we can trust our results. We're going to put in a valid, I don't know, whatever we want to call it, at the top, and we're just going to, you can either click on the data and go to the filter there, or you can go back to the home and use the filter. So click on the filter. It's reapplied our little filter handles. We don't need this column of data now, so we can delete it. Actually, no, we can't, so leave it as it is for a minute. Now we can sort this data, so there's our 3 values. It's either an MK value, an NN value, or a not applicable. Let's get rid of all the not applicables. So now we are literally stuck with the fields based on a geographical location that we want. So let's just move on down. Let's have a look how many we've got now. Still quite a lot. We're looking at, we haven't selected them all, so it's hidden our records that aren't relevant. So let's copy this out. So copy this all the way out. I'm going to copy these values, copy, new spreadsheet, lots of new spreadsheets in this activity, paste those values in. I deliberately didn't pick up the 2 fields that we didn't want because that saves me deleting them in a second. Let's just make these a little bit smaller so we can get all our data on the one screen. There you go. I don't even have to reduce this to 70% now, but we're going to scroll down. Oh, I was a bit ambitious. Let's have a look. How many fields do we have? 200, 400. Oh, we're into about 1,000. So there we go. Line 1,206. So I have taken that spreadsheet of over 90,000, or no, 900, I can't even remember how many it was, like 900,000 records, and filtered out 1,206 that are actually useful to my business right now. So this basically is now where the sort of marketing activity goes to my virtual assistant. So I'm just going to make this sort of stand out to help him, and I'm just going to literally tidy this up. There we go. Right, so as a business now, I now know the company name, the company number, I know their address details. So if I wanted to run a direct mail campaign right now, other than a couple of hours work, this data was free to obtain. I could do so. I've left in the URL to the company page on Company's House. Let me just click on this first one to give you an example. So I've just turned it into a URL, and there you go. We can actually learn more about this particular business. That's all good. That might help my virtual assistant look up what's going on. I can use this in my information in future marketing activities if I wanted to. For example, I could segment my database in the future with this. Obviously in this format we could save it as a CSV file and upload it to our CRM system or our marketing mailing list houses. There will be a caution on that in just a moment that I'll give you, but obviously for me, I want to know the contact name. I'm going to want to know their mobile number so I can send MSS messages. I want to know what their email address is. I also want to know what the office phone number is, and I want to know what the office email is in case it's like info@, hello@, because not all websites produce this information, and the website URL. So a couple of bits of information and things to bear in mind here right now. So this is my spreadsheet. I will then save it, send it to my VA, who I've got a guy in Argentina, charges me £5 an hour, will sit there for however long it takes and populate 1,200 records, and he's going to do that with 7 different spreadsheets. Now, as a quick word of advice, everything we've done so far is public record, okay? It's publicly available on the internet through Company's House. You do not need to have GDPR permission to have done the exercise that I have just done. How you now communicate with these people is on your shoulders. Okay, Okay, so like I said to you a minute ago, you could upload this to your CRM system or your marketing mailing list house. I use Active Campaign, you might use MailChimp, something like that. But here's where you have to have a word of caution. First of all, these kind of companies only like you to work with data that you have gained permission to use, okay? So although this information is public record, you haven't actually gone to Joe Blogs or whatever that first business was and go, can I send you an email? You haven't got that permission. So there are ways around it, and you're not breaking any law because you have legally found that information once my VA's gone out to their website, tracked down this business, checked out their contact us page, found their emails, their contacts, looked at who their team members are and populated this data for me. Not every business is going to have that data, but he will do his best, okay? And it gives me a really good head start. Those companies like MailChimp, Active Campaign, Aweber, who provide marketing mailing lists, they are just a small business owner who has decided to take the rule in-house that you aren't allowed to use mailing lists that you have purchased or that you have acquired via these kind of means. So how do you get around this? Well, the data that we have collected is public record, and so is the information on a contact page of any kind of website. Okay, let's use my own website as an example. Bear with me a second while I just go over to my my head office, for example. So this is my company head website. So you go to the contact. Maybe I was one of those businesses on that list. My VA's out there searching my business, trying to find out more about me. It can check my address. There's all of my generic office email addresses, so he'll probably grab that first one and away you go. He also might decide to go and do a little bit of a diving about on my team page, work out who the people are in my business, and he'll come down and go, oh look, you know, she's the director, so she's obviously the decision maker, and therefore he'll have my name, and that's how he's going to populate all of this information. But having done that doesn't mean to say I can just go and still load this into Active Campaign, but what I can do is send them an email through Outlook, and the easiest way to do that is to basically copy the list of email addresses when they are populated, put them into something like Notepad over here so that you can get rid of all of the formatting, and basically once you've done that, copy and paste it into the blind carbon copy of Outlook. So here's my Outlook ready to go. If I was to paste those email addresses now in the to or the CC, the recipient receiving the email will be able to see every other person communicated to in that one action. So the BCC, meaning blind carbon copy, means you can copy and paste those emails, put them in this section, and when that email is sent, the recipients aren't going to know about the other people existing. So you could send it to 2 people or 2,000 people and they're not going to know. The caveat here is how you then work smart. So what I've done is I've created an email signature. You can see there it's a cold email invite, where it basically says hi, and then obviously I'd put some sort of useful line, and this is how I'm introducing people to my concept of my Business Marketing Expo. I've just got the one link, so if they want to find out more about it, away they go off to my website. So then they would go to my website, she says, trying to get that to work. They'll click on the link, they'd end up on my website. So this is how I've now got traffic to my website for free. And then down here, they'll learn all about it. And then there's obviously actions that they can take. So if they want to book a free ticket, by doing so, they'll end up on Eventbrite, and when they sign up, that information is populating my mailing list. And at the end of the registrar process there, it will say, when we've gone down to it, there we go, register, 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 wait for it to go down. Okay, and at the bottom of here, it will say, do you grant permission for this to be used? I've got a Zapier connection to Eventbrite feeding my Active Campaign mailing list, and from that moment on, when they hit that register button, I have now permission gained their details into my mailing list, and I am able to communicate them through Active Campaign in the future. So that's how I'm collecting data that way. Likewise, if you sign up for a stand, it's a website connected to my Active Campaign. You go through the checkout and it's all connected. And again, that's how I'm gaining permission. So all I'm doing at the moment with these emails is basically finding a way to start the conversation. So obviously you'll be able to read that for yourself. I've done it very politely. I've introduced myself. In this particular case, this was when I was working with BNI members around all the different BNI groups, but that's just one way of doing it. The only other caveat that you need to think about on this process that I would suggest is when you send that email out, maybe open up a second email account. For example, Angela.McCall instead of Angela on its own, so that you can still represent yourself, because your inbox will get absolutely chock-a-block with replies. The second thing that I would suggest you do is check with your IT company, if you have one, that there is no limitations on Outlook, the software, as well as the email server that is processing those emails when you send them, because sometimes there is a cap. I would say do things in bulks of about 50 emails at a time. I think my IT company upped my Outlook software to allow me to send 250 emails a day, or in one transaction, I think it is, but I think the server still has a limit of about 1,000 emails. I can't remember those numbers exactly, but there is a caveat there that you need to go and do your homework. If you're not sure, do an activity like this and break it down to about 50 emails a day, and then another 50, and it'll take you a couple of weeks to get through that 1,200, and away you go. So this could then become a marketing activity that you run for the next maybe 6 weeks as you go through all 7 of those spreadsheets and you filter out the people that you want to target. And that's how I've been running it in my business, and to get that first wave of business up and running as a new entrepreneur, branching out to something slightly different to what I've been doing for the last 2 decades. So if you found this video helpful, please do subscribe to my channel. I know I haven't been around much for the last year, but I will be back with a whole bunch of videos like this in the future, and it really does mean a lot to me that you found this really useful. So take care, and I'll see you on another video real soon. Thanks, bye.